Welcome. Welcome with peace and joy. Greetings. We're happy to have you here with us. This is Miracles with a Twist. I'm Reverend Lori Cardona. I'm here with Reverend Lisa Benton. Goddi Lisa. Hi. We are recording on February 17th. This day is very important to us, to all of us in the LMC Interfaith Ministries family, as well as the Miracles with a Twist family, because this is the day that we specifically put aside to honor the passing of a very beloved friend and spiritual sister, Pam Robb. Now, we know, and Goddi Lisa and I have discussed this, we know that everyone has suffered losses. And in our spiritual family specifically, we lost 3 beloved members, friends within 1 year, all unexpectedly, all tragically. And personally also, we've lost people to suicide, to car crashes. I mean, we all have our stories. And we tend to romanticize the people we've lost. But today, as we honor Pam Robb, it's not about romanticizing, but about recognizing that she lived her life as a mystic. And we in the Course in Miracles community see a Course in Miracles as a mystic's path. And we strive to rise to that way of life, to the way of life where we are in constant contact with our devotional principles and dedication and our willingness to do our own self-correction and our own self-awareness around our emotional growth and our spiritual growth. And it's interesting because Pam thought of me as a teacher of the Course, but I thought of her as a teacher by way of example of how she lived her life. Even though she was not an ordained minister, she was certainly an interfaith minister. She ministered to all of us. She ministered to animals. She was a great volunteer to the places and the causes that she believed in, including the cause of rescue animals. And she died loving what she did, because we see it as a tragedy. She was mauled to death by a dog. And yet we wonder in the bigger picture if she herself sees it as a tragedy, because she lived her life every morning, from what I understand. She woke up at before the crack of dawn and began her daily devotions by studying A Course in Miracles, by writing in her journal, by doing rituals that were specific to her love of Native American spirituality. Whenever we were together, she was very focused, very loving. When she passed, there were bracelets that were made in her honor that we all wear. They have her name on one side. On the other side, they say kind, caring, calm. She was an example of kindness, caring, and calmness. On the inside of the bracelet, it says, "Be like Pam." And so as we—
And you're wearing her shirt.
Oh yes, this is actually Pam's shirt. This is Pam's t-shirt. It says, "Here's my heart, Lord." It's a song we all sang together before every gathering. And she's actually the one who encouraged us to sing that same song every time, so that everybody would know the words and we could all sing along together. And so this is my little self-portrait. And then it says, "Here's my heart, Lord." And Goddi Lisa is also wearing one, because we had merchandise for a while there. And Pam's spouse, Angie, honored me by letting me have her t-shirt. We're wearing that today, and we're wearing the bracelets. And so we honor her specifically because we do believe that not just in life did she show us what it is like to live as a spiritual devotee to a mystic's path, but even in death. Because in her death, we had to rise. We had to learn how to deal with her death, how to rise above the circumstances, the upset out there in the world. We had to learn how to incorporate our learning, our belief system, into being at one with a peaceful understanding beyond what we could possibly understand with our mind. If we could understand with our heart that there was a bigger picture, Because in our daily lives, when we try to live our lives daily on a spiritual path, we can say, oh, look, I'm being silly, I'm being jealous, I'm being upset. And we try to catch and release those things. We try to just catch them and correct ourselves. But when tragedy strikes, there's a different something. There's something else that occurs. The grief, the shock, the almost disassociation with daily life that occurs, that we as humans with egos and with perspective have got to find a way to incorporate into our spiritual way of life. And so as we talk about today, Goddi Lisa and I, we will strive to see how we came together as a spiritual family, remembering what was important and how we've come through it together 3 years later. So let's begin with a prayer. Deep breath in. We exhale and put our hands on our hearts. We give thanks for this opportunity to be together as a spiritual family, heart to heart, soul to soul. Knowing that if it was not for the peace that surpasses all understanding, we would be seeped in our horror, in our grief, in our judgment. And yet we give thanks for people who walk the earth, like the great masters and the unsung heroes like Pam Robb. We pray that we can rise higher, love steadily, and forgive readily, to be kind, caring, and calm as she was, as she showed us. We give thanks for her. We give thanks for one another. And with another deep breath, we settle into this moment. Goddi Lisa, you'll just indulge me a little bit of a story here. You know, I knew Pam for 14 years. She was a very, very dear friend. And for 10 of those years, we attended a Course in Miracles together. And I say together because even if I was facilitating, she was always there as a presence that was an example. I kind of feel like I could have stood there and said, this is what the Course tells us. Hey, Pam, here's somebody who lives it. I could have just pointed to her and talked about her day, talked about her week, talked about how she herself processed whatever it is that may have been going on in her life. And on the day she died, it was a Thursday, and we always got together on a Thursday. You and your beloved husband, Paul, would be here, Tanzua, a number, 6 or 7, maybe 8 people, because we came to my house during COVID and beyond. So we kept the numbers kind of small, but we had a larger community through the live stream. And I had a little dog by the name of Ernesto, who wanted my attention during the live streams, and he would come over and poke me in the leg. And so Pam would sit with him, and she would soothe him, and he would stay so calm just in her presence. And when she passed away, I got a candle to sit in the spot where she used to sit, and we would light it every Thursday, and he would sit next to that candle just as calm as if she was there with him, which showed us and reminded us that the light that she is and continues to be was that kind, caring, calm presence, even for a little critter. And so when we as a community, as a family, try to understand how can we get through this together, we cried together, we came together very often. We would have sort of emergency gatherings. I would have Zoom gatherings, beach gatherings. And one of the things that I can tell you, that I can confess to, that it was not of me. I know that you all look to me as the spiritual leader of the family, but it was not of me. It was of Spirit through me. Because the Lori who was here was staring at the walls in grief. I had, when I had people visiting me, I'd say, how was our time together? They were like, well, you weren't really there. It's just, I was so in shock. So the me that showed up for you all, that is the willingness to be a vessel of service, to allow spirit to come in and take over. And that's part of the mystic's path, to be able to say, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. Do it for me. Let me just throw my hands up. Let me just surrender. And when we surrender, we allow spirit to move through us. And that's the only way I was able to show up and to continue facilitating and comforting and gathering. There's a lesson in A Course in Miracles, lesson number 25, that says, I don't know what anything is for. And I kept reminding myself of that. When people would come to me and say, why did this happen? And how did she die like that? And I would say, we don't know what anything is for. There is a picture beyond the snapshot of this moment in time. And then there's another quote that I wanted to read to you. It's in the Manual for Teachers. And when we try to understand something, why did this happen? How did this happen? And we have our judgment about it. This is what it tells us. In order to judge anything rightly, you would have to be fully aware of an inconceivable range of things past, present, and what we have to recognize in the future in advance of anything to understand the effects of everyone and anyone involved. So we would have to be certain that we would know things that are impossible for us to know. We can only find peace with the not knowing. And with the not knowing, we let go of the physical presence of Pam, knowing that the essence of who she was and who she is stays with us because she taught us and she continues to teach us.
Lori, so much went through my head as you were speaking. The missing Pam, just seeing Pam, seeing your shirt, seeing Pam in that shirt, particularly in a special picture that we have of her, of us all. But her being in the corner, I also have a picture of her cuddling Ernesto leaning up against your couch.
Yes.
And I just, and you had mentioned very clearly that Pam lived the life of a mystic. And I think we've mentioned this off and on over the years, but over the year in particular, because we talked about mystics. Is that sometimes that definition can be a little wonky to people. Some people consider it with magic or woo-woo or just whatever. But I found this quote from Richard Rohr, who we've talked about before. And he said, we don't need to be afraid of the word mystic. It simply means one who has moved from mere belief of a belonging system about God to actually experience. And that was and is Pam.
Yes.
And I think about the first time I met her, I was stricken, not sure about, first of all, her persona. Pam presents a very healthy, attractive persona. And that was, and that usually is what you usually see when you first meet somebody. But at the same time, there was a sense of calm, a sense of humor, a sense of spirituality, all of this, like, boom, right in my face. And as we talked about, went on with our class, she didn't usually speak that much in class. Pam did. But when she did, it's like that commercial for whatever investment company it was, when somebody talks, everybody listens. Well, that's the way it was, every head would turn and she would say something very unassuming, very practical, very spiritual, directly, and she might even be quoting from the course or paraphrasing the course. And the more I got to know her, the more I saw, because I was really in awe of her. The more I got to see, wow, she's not putting this out there because we're in a spiritual gathering. And I think that's what Father Rohr was saying, because just knowing the ABCs of God does not make one a mystic. It does not lead them onto a mystic's path. It's experiential. And I saw that in her in everything, even when she was joking and kind of she had a very dry sense of humor. And again, we could think of a mystic as, dressed like maybe Stevie Nicks and floating around with a tambourine and talking whatever. And that's not to judge Stevie Nicks, happened to like her very much, but that wasn't Pam. Pam was very simple in her appearance and everything, but very striking. And it was just amazing to me how she did this. It was innate in her. And I thought, wow, this just comes to her. And then, of course, as you pointed out, Pam had a very, I wouldn't call it strict because I would call it more loving ritual that she would go through in the morning. And I remember her telling me she liked to walk in the grass when she would go outside, when the weather was right and everything. She would like to go out in the grass in her bare feet and connect with the earth. And that again was her. And that reminded me of Kutut that I talked about last week with, or last time we got together, was when you keep your feet on the ground and your heart space in the heavens, and that's what she did. And she had her connection she had shared with me with Native Americans was extremely germane to how she chose to move on in life. I think she had a little bit of DNA, the Walt Whitman, Pam Whitman Robb.
That's right. That was her part of her
right
ancestry. Yes,
exactly. So, and then at the same time, there's this beautiful spirit, almost like an apparition or something. I remember we were walking out the door and she told me that Tanzua was standing in front of me, and I guess we were all going somewhere, I don't know where. And she said to me, one time I was walking behind Tanzua, we were walking a labyrinth.
Yes.
And she said, I had this uncontrollable urge to just shove her. And that sounds could be disturbing to some people. And you would think that would never come out of Pam, but it was hysterical. That here she was, someone's, everybody's all through the labyrinth, finding peace, centering and all that. And there's Pam thinking, wouldn't it be funny? Just shoved him.
Right. Right.
And I can see her just standing there watching the reaction to everyone. But she just, she truly left a hole in my heart that needed to be filled. And when I first learned of her passing, and you had called me, and you called me and Paul on my cell, and we had been eating lunch out. And so I had my phone in the car. And so I didn't get your calls. And so when I got in the car, I checked for messages and I saw all these calls from you. And I said to Paul, something's wrong. Something's wrong because Lori doesn't call me, one call after another. And I called you back and you were hysterical. And you said, I can't tell you exactly what the words you were, but I heard that Pam was mauled by a dog. But you said something before that, and I didn't know you said Pam passed away. I thought she had been mauled by a dog. We got to get there. We're 3.5 hours away, but we got to get there. And I got to call Lori, and I called you, and you said, and I was like, we're coming down, and you said, Lisa, she's gone. She's gone. And it was surreal, and I'm sure that anybody who was listening has been there, where they cannot believe what they just heard. And that's where the emptiness is. It's like that person just fell right out of my heart, is gone. And I, as an aside, had been coming off exactly 1 month before the loss of my dearest, longest, closest friend in the entire universe. And my mother was dying. So I was in a pretty rough place to begin with. So the thing that I would like to point out is that never in the passing of Pam, the prequel, the passing 1 month earlier of my dearest, longtime, bestest friend, and my mother's suffering for years, never once did I get angry and want to blame. It wasn't that way. Now, I have, back in 1976, my brother, who was 17, I was 20, he committed suicide. I remember screaming running down the street, screaming, and just looking for somebody to blame, looking for somebody to hold accountable, looking for somebody to bring him back, looking for somebody to beat the hell out of. That never happened to me with Pam. And because I know it's because our group, and in this specific case, Pam and I were on the same path. It wasn't like we hear a lot of times, oh, so-and-so wouldn't have wanted us to feel this way or whatever. And I believe all that, it's all true. But there was a divine connection with Pam where I would be dishonoring her, I think, and I didn't think this rationally or anything, but looking on it, I feel that that's what I would have done if I had been angry and it's not that I wasn't devastated, but I wasn't angry and looking to blame. I was looking for peace, not to block her out, to keep her in my heart, but to also mourn her and support my friends, my community that I needed desperately to support me, who had been supporting me for months before. And something ultimately that I read in A Course in Miracles helped me to get through, and I keep it in my phone because it's something that I believe is just a way to live and to see things. And I'm going to post this because it is a little bit lengthy, but I would like to read it. And it's from the A Course in Miracles text chapter 21, and it's called The Forgotten Song. And it says, listen, perhaps catch a hint of an ancient state not quite forgotten, dim perhaps, and yet not altogether unfamiliar, like a song whose name is long forgotten and the is long forgotten, and the circumstances in which you heard completely unremembered. Not the whole song has stayed with you, but just a little wisp of melody attached not to a person or a place or anything particular. But you remember from this little part how lovely was the song, how wonderful the setting were you heard it, and how you loved those who were there and listened with you. The notes are nothing, yet you kept them with you, not for themselves, but as a soft reminder of what would make you weep if you remembered how dear it was to you. You could remember, yet you are afraid, believing you would lose the world you learned since then. And yet you know nothing in the world you learned is half so dear as this. Listen and see if you remember an ancient song you knew so long ago, and held more dear than any melody you taught yourself to cherish.
Mm.
That is truly, to me, the truth, the mysticism, what I carried with me, and what I am thinking of today is the note, the melody of Pam that she brought. And I can give specifics and not specifics. And but there is something there that will always be with me, always. And I can do this whenever I have to, even if I have to go to my phone, and that's why I keep it in my phone. Because it is, we don't want to lose these people. We don't want to have closure. I'm not a believer in closure. I'm simply not, I don't want it. I don't want to close what I had with Pam. I want the real connection that Pam and I had, and though I miss her desperately, and I miss everything about her, I have her with me.
Yes.
And I think that is mysticism.
Yes, and you can put that if you wanted to. We can cut and paste that into the comment section. It's a beautiful prayer from A Course in Miracles from the text. There's three things I want to jump in and say here. One of the things is about the part where we take our tragedy and use it for blame or for upset, and that was happening in the community. That was occurring in the dog rescue community, the pros and cons around whether or not the dog should have been put down after it killed Pam. And people started calling me. People started saying, they say, "Oh, I'm upset with this one. Can you do that?" And I said, I will not engage in those conversations. I will only engage in conversations that have to do with the spiritual perspective of how we're going to get through this, because the upset is the excuse to be adversarial. The upset is the excuse to fight with one another. And so we decided as a spiritual family not to engage in any of that, that we were going to focus on the understanding that, yes, this is grief, this is painful. I think I told you the story. I have a friend who has a Buddhist temple in Miami, and she was so happy because she was bringing her teacher for all of us to come hear his teachings. And even though he had these wise, profound teachings, he was crying, and because he had just lost one of his students, and he was like, "Oh, my heart is hurting, and I'm crying, but that doesn't take away from my belief in what I'm teaching you." And there is always our humanness, our humanness. They say the shortest quote in the Christian scripture is Jesus wept. Like we all cry, we all have our pain, we all have our sadness. And yet we use those times of pain and sadness and tragedy and heartache to transform what could be the ego's upset into the soul's understanding, the soul's knowing that there's something beyond what I can intellectually know. Anyway, so I wanted to address that. I also wanted to say back in 2020 was my 20-year ordination anniversary, and I was going to have a big party. I had selected a venue, and COVID hit. So I couldn't have my party. So I turned it into a cyber party, and I asked people to send me their blessings. And I had, I don't know, maybe close to 100 cards and emails and letters. And so I cut them all out. I don't know if you and Paul were part of the family at the time. Yeah. So remember, I made these wall hangings, and I had them all over the front of my house, and it was like this amazing collage of blessings. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So then eventually I took everything down. I kept one thing. And it's there to this day, almost five years later. And it's a feather that Pam gave me. Pam and I both had a love of finding mystical, magical, unexpected feathers out in the world. And she had given me this big white feather, not excessively big, but it's kind of what we find here in South Florida. And on it, she had written on the stem of the feather, she put a little piece of paper and she wrote in tiny letters from, I believe it's from the second chapter in the text. I am here only to be truly helpful. And that's on my door to this day. And I remember right before she passed, I said, do you know that that feather's still there? She said, yeah, I see it every time. And I believe that she was walking the talk. She was here only to be truly helpful as a volunteer everywhere she went, but also to be a kind voice, to be kind, caring, calm. She was kind, caring, calm. Let's be like Pam, in all circumstances. And the third thing I wanted to say was that for many years, Pam would do yoga. She called it mindful movement before our monthly full moon gatherings out on the beach. And she would do about 20 minutes to half an hour of stretches, mindful movement. And then we would have the full moon gathering. And as you know, we did a ritual. We did a cleansing ritual. And to this day, we still do this cleansing ritual. But instead of doing a fire ritual, which is dangerous, we do a water ritual. And we put Alka-Seltzer or dental cleaning tablets into the water because it transforms and it represents the transformation that occurs within us when we release our concerns and we watch the transformation. And at the end of every gathering, I hold that water up, and people sometimes they see the pictures like, what are you doing? Because I have these pictures of me holding the bowl of the transformation of the water from clear to a beautiful blue or whatever color it is, because we've watched it. And then we all do a blessing over it. Everybody raises their hands and we do a blessing over it. Well, one night, I had a gathering in the back of a friend's house instead of at the beach. For some reason, I don't even remember why, but we did it in the back of a friend's house. And it might have been like rainy. We thought it was gonna rain, so it was indoor, outdoor kind of thing. But we were outdoors and I was doing the final blessing. And as my hand was up there, we all started seeing these sparks. And it turned out that 2 transformers had blown in the city of Wilton Manors. And so all of a sudden, this light comes shooting across this way, comes shooting across that way. And everybody's like cheering, like, whoa, what a blessing. But then the whole town went black completely. The transformers blew out the lights in the whole town. So we went out front to the front of the house, and turns out that not only did the transformers blow, but the electric wires and lines had been whipping around and whipped all the cars in the front yard. Whipping all the cars. All the cars were damaged. Well, the police came, the fire came, and we were restricted. We were told, you cannot move till further notice, go in the house or in the back of the house. At the time, my friend Joanna Gabriel was alive, and she led us in a couple songs. We were singing Amazing Grace, and we were lighting candles. We had this amazing post-gathering celebration of whatever that was that just happened. In spiritual terms, it was like, wow, was the power of our intentions that powerful that, anyways, it was just, it turned out to be a fun evening. In fact, it was so amazing that one of the women there, everybody was pretty excited, but a little upset too, because there was a lot of car damage, But there was this one woman that we ran into the next week at the next gathering. And I said, oh, did you give FP&L your name and number? Because FP&L was taking names and numbers to pay for the car repairs. She had a brand new Mercedes, black, shiny, beautiful. So I asked her, did you take your car? And she said, I will never take my car in because that was the most amazing night of my life. She goes, and I want those scratches on my car to remind me. But this is what Pam sent me. Pam sent me this email about a week later. She said, being there that night was a humbling experience for me to see how the unexpected can strike at any moment. It made me realize how important it is to be in conscious contact with spirit at all times. Being there that night, I want to repeat it. Being there that night was a humbling experience for me to see how the unexpected can strike at any moment. And it made me realize how important it is to be in conscious contact with spirit at all times. Well, the unexpected did strike. And it
Yeah.
was up to us, because she told us, to be in conscious contact with spirit at all times.
Absolutely, and thanks for all that neat stuff. It takes me back, and it's just a nice ride to, and I'm so grateful that we have this forum to honor her and to also bring in the power, the absolute power of mysticism and the principles that are laid out in A Course in Miracles and many scripture and writings by very wise, enlightened people, these truths. Because when I think of my experience with the loss of my brother, now I was much younger, I was 20 years old, so I didn't have a lot of wisdom. And so that there was no place to default to other than to frustration, anger, loss, grief, you name it. And it went on for years. I actually committed to him that I would take my own life when my son was turned 18, but he needed me. So, well, when he was 18, I was going to go join my brother. I mean, that's the way I was thinking. And I wasn't, that's how desperately I wanted him back. Wasn't going inside and going, okay, this is hideous, and cry, do whatever I needed to do, knowing that he could never leave me. He couldn't leave me. If I thought of him, he's with me, and I think of him every day, and it was 1976. And I don't, sometimes I cry. Something will remind me of something that I wished, he was here, because I'd love to hear what he had to say when he saw an old movie or something. But to the path of the mystic mind, the Christ consciousness, whatever, Buddha mind, whatever you want to call it, but we call it mysticism, and that we are mystics, is so powerful compared to gloom, doom, and grief. It sounds kind of crazy, like it's not, because anybody who's experienced any trauma, and like I said, I'm sure everybody listening has, and it's not to minimize it. It's just to say, we can see better than this. This person can't leave us, or whatever the tragedy is, because there's all kinds of tragedies. We can see beyond this, because what we need, we have, and we've seen it, and we've experienced it, and we've heard it. We've seen it in friends, we've seen it in nature, we've seen it in babies, we've seen it in elderly people, we've just seen it in the streets. It's there, and it's so gratifying to know that I know that that's there. And I'm not saying that it'll fall off the wagon sometimes.
Well, we all do. I mean, we all,
And that's my practice is
right, because the challenge on a daily basis is to find that balance, and to realize when we are defaulting into the shame, blame, or bringing back some negativity that we might be holding inside around the circumstances. And and by negativity, I mean, our own perception that might lead us into that whole shame, blame, what could I have done? What could they have done? What should have been done? Woulda, shoulda, coulda. So Pam was such a great example of accepting what is as it is in the moment. And, she really believed in what she was doing. She really believed that the animals that she was serving were in need of her care, and they were. And we started out by saying, some people died doing what they love, and she did. She died doing what she loved, and we have judgment around it. We have perspective around it. And thank goodness we also have A Course in Miracles to give us peace around it, to remind us that we can see peace instead of the upset. And there's a great quote in one of the supplements called The Song of Prayer. I don't have it readily in front of me, but it is about death. And it talks about how this is how death should be, meaning that it is seen as a liberty. Liberty from what? Not liberty from our loved ones, not liberty from life if we're enjoying it, but liberty from the ego's entrapment. And we try to get to that as mystics living on the path. But we're never going to be completely free of it, because when we are, we're going to be free of this time and space. And so I really want to remind us all, and remind myself on a daily basis, to be like Aunt Pam, that in every circumstance, I can strive to be kind, caring, and calm. That as life moves us into times when we feel upset with another's behavior, or we feel betrayed, or whatever it is, that we can label it and say, this is my experience now in this moment. I want to be more like Pam. I want to be kind, caring, and calm. I want to look at this with eyes of love. I want to rise higher. I want to forgive steadily and love readily. And I want to thank you for this conversation and for sharing this day with me as we honor Pam. And as we remember all, like you said, your brother. I also have a dear friend who died by suicide this year. And we as we said, we've all had tragedies. And not one of us is getting out of here alive. And so there will be a day when someone will mourn us. But you know what? If I can be honored as we are honoring Pam, then I know that I will have lived my life well, that I will have lived my life the way I set a standard. And if I died right now, I'm not sure that would be the case, because I am not yet Pam. And when we say, let's look with eyes of love, look with eyes of Christ, and I could say, look with eyes like Pam. So thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. I miss her.
Yeah, I do too. So let's go on with our day and be like Pam. God bless you.